So now we are going to look at a few examples of how to interpret and analyze the data from a box and whisker plot. So looking at this first example, it says Mr. Hoffman owns a number of burger restaurants and he compared how many burgers the restaurant served each day. This box and whisker plot shows the results. Okay, so notice that there still is a title to this data display so we know what data we are looking at. Part A says what is the 5-number summary of the data set. So remember from my vocabulary example that the 5-number summary is the 5 things that are needed, the 5 pieces of data that are needed to construct a box and whisker plot. However, if we are already looking at a box and whisker plot, we are then able to find those pieces of data. So that is what this question is asking us to do. The first of the 5-number summary data pieces is the minimum, also known as the minimum extreme. I know that that is going to be one of my whiskers, meaning one of the 2 lines that come off either side of the box. So the minimum is always going to be on the left side of the data display, and the maximum is going to be on the right. So if I'm looking for the minimum, I see that the furthest dot to the left is just above the value of 160. So I know that my minimum value is 160. Now I'm asked to find the lower quartile, the median, the upper quartile, and the maximum. Since we just found the minimum and we know that is the furthest spot to the left, I know that my maximum is going to be furthest to the right. However, when I look down, I don't see a value written on the number line. However, I know that I can figure out how much I am counting by looking at what is provided to me. So I see that I start at 160. There is one interval in between 160 and 200. I know that the difference between 200 and 160 is 40. And I know that this tick mark is halfway between 160 and 200. So halfway between 40, so half of 40 is 20. So that means I need to have my second interval be 20 more than 160. That means my intervals are counting by 20. So I have 160, 180, 200, 220, 240, and then 260. So this means that my maximum value is 260. Now I have these 3 key pieces of information, which are my lower quartile, or quartile 1, which remember is the median of the bottom half of our data set. So that means it is going to be the furthermost left-hand side of the box. So when I look at that, I see that this left-hand side of my box is 180. I know that the median, also known as quartile 2, is going to be the middle of my data set. So it is going to be the line in the middle of my box right here, and that is above 200. And then finally, I know that the furthermost part of my box on the right-hand side is above 240. So these are the 5-number summaries, or the pieces of data that are necessary and are always included in a box and whisker plot. As a reminder, our box and whisker plot is again just showing how we are splitting our data into quartiles. So remember that the middle 50% of our data is what's represented with the box. And then the whiskers off to the sides are representing the spread of our data. So what is the full range? How far does it spread? So when I look at this again, I can see the 4 parts of this data display. So I have 25% of my data here, 25% of my data here, 25% of my data here, and the last 25% here. Because remember, if I have 25% times those 4 pieces, that gives me 100%, or the whole data display. Looking at this second example, it says the Nugent family kept track of their monthly electricity bills for 20 months and displayed the cost of the bills in the box plot below. Okay, so the main difference that I notice here is that the number line is above my box and whisker plot, which is completely okay as long as I can identify what value lines up with the parts of my display, which it does here. So again, it is asking us what is the 5-number summary of the data set. So again, I know that my minimum and maximum are going to be the endpoints of my box plot. I know that the minimum number is the smallest number. It is going to be the furthest value to the left. And I know that the maximum is going to be my largest number, so it is going to be furthest to the right. So when looking at this data display, I see that the smallest value given to me is 56. So that means my minimum, or my minimum extreme, is 56. I know that my maximum is going to be the furthest number to the right of this data display, and that is 107. As you probably have noticed, the numbers are not only just lining up with the number line up here, but they are also given to us on the bottom. Now it's asking for lower quartile, median, and upper quartile. I know that my median is directly in the middle, so if I have a 5-number summary and I'm already given 5 numbers, I know it's the one exactly in the middle. I also know that my median is what is the line cutting the middle box into 2 separate boxes. So I know that my median is 72. My lower quartile, or quartile 1, is going to be in between my minimum and my median. So that value is 66. And then I know that my upper quartile, or quartile 3, is between my median and my maximum. So that value is 85. This last example, you probably already noticed before we even started that I am not given a box and whisker plot. However, it says using the data below, come up with the 5-number summary of the data. So we can still find our 5-number summary from just a data set, which in turn will allow us, if we choose, to draw our own box and whisker plot. As a reminder, if I'm going to do anything that has to do with finding the median or my quartiles, the very first thing I need to do when looking at my data display, or my data set, is putting them in order from least to greatest. Now that I have ordered my pieces of data from least to greatest, I now know that the most important thing that I find first is my median, because based off my median, then I can find my lower quartile and my upper quartile. So the first thing I'm going to ask myself is, how many pieces of data are in this data display? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces of data. So that means I have an odd number of pieces of data. So that means I'm going to have 1 digit that is exactly in the middle of this data set. If I have 9 pieces of data and 1 in the middle, that means there are 8 left over. So that means if I split 8 in half, there should be 4 pieces of data on the left of the median and 4 pieces of data on the right of the median, giving me a median. The very middle number is 17. I also know, just looking at this data display, or I'm sorry, this data set, we have yet to put it in a display, that it is very easy for me to pick out the minimum, the number furthest to the left, the smallest number, as 10, and then the maximum, the largest number furthest to the right, as 22. Now I know that if I am finding my quartile 1, that means I am finding the median of the lower half of my data. So that means I am looking to find what is the average of 10 and 14. So I find the mean of 10 and 14 to find my quartile 1 or my lower quartile. Or essentially I'm finding what number is halfway between 10 and 14. So when I take 10 plus 14, I get 24, and 24 divided by 2 is 12. So that means my quartile 1, or the median of the lower half of my data, is 12. I need to do the same thing with the upper half to find the upper quartile, or quartile 3. Again, I need to find my two middle values, which are 20 and 21. So I need to find the average of 20 and 21, or since they are consecutive numbers, the number that is going to be between them. So I know halfway between 20 and 21 is 20 and a half, or 20 and 5/10. With those pieces of information, so my 5-number summary, I would be able to draw a box and whisker plot from that. When it comes to your guided lesson checks for understanding questions, you will be asked questions about what is necessary to find the pieces of data for a box and whisker plot. You need to understand what the box portion of a box and whisker plot is and what the whisker is of the box and whisker plot. So remember, the box portion is the middle 50% of your data, and the whiskers represent the overall spread or range of the entire data set. If you feel like you would like to see some more examples of how this is done or how box and whisker plots are constructed, there are going to be 2 Khan Academy videos attached to your roadmap, and then you will have practice on Khan Academy as well.